Welcome to the Career Coffee Chat show and podcast. My name is Erin Urban, and I'm a certified career strategist and executive coach. And what I do is I help experience-driven professionals remove career roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, influence, and income. Today, we'll be talking about how to turn stress into success. And I don't know about you, but I am super excited to learn more about how to do that. And 2020 was definitely a stressful year for most of us. And 2021 is going to look a little brighter, and also know that it won't be right away. So we might feel a little bit of stress because we're very anxious to have it be better now. So if you're just tuning in, please say hi, say your name, and say where you're from. I'd love to welcome you to the Career Coffee Chat show. And don't forget, the Career Coffee Chat podcast is also on all the major channels, including Spotify, iTunes, Apple, and Pandora, Amazon, in fact, also, as well as my YouTube channel. So it's on all the major channels, as well as a few that you wouldn't expect. And today, I'm also extremely thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Rob Pennington. Now, Dr. Rob Pennington is a certified psychologist. He is a master. How can I say this? He is a master of turning stress into success. He's also probably one of the most relaxed human beings I know. And considering what he's actually been through in his life, it is amazing to me. So a little bit more about Rob. Rob has been helping people have more successful work relationships for over 45 years. He's an award-winning speaker and author of his autobiographical self-help book, Find the Upside in Down Times. And he's also a well-known executive coach and trainer. You can find more about him at drrobcoaches.com, so www.drrobcoaches.com, and you'll also learn more about him here today. So again, if you're just tuning in and you've never seen my smiling face before, my name is CoachEUrban or Erin Urban. You can find out more about me at CoachEUrban.com. And I also have a book coming out in January 27th. I'm very excited. It's all about elevating your career for more impact and income, and how to overcome your roadblocks that are standing in your way. Some of those you may not even realize, to achieve the career growth goals that you want. So today we'll be talking about how to turn stress into success. And number one, avoid maybe the one thing that causes most misunderstandings, easy for me to say. Quickly recognize key triggers that get us into trouble and how to turn stress into success, and increase your influence in 2021, improve performance, lead more effectively, and collaborate better. And without further ado, I am going to introduce Dr. Rob Pennington. Rob, so great to have you on the show.
Wow,
I'm very excited.
Feel so good about me after that introduction. Thank you so much.
You feel better about yourself. Your head can't hardly fit in the screen. It's great to have you on the show, Rob.
Thank you for the opportunity to share some things that have made such a difference in my life. So I don't have any doubt about their value. But I really am grateful to be able to share them with other people to hopefully save them the time and avoid the pain I went through to learn some of the stuff that's made a difference for me.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. So I know you are a familiar character with stress. I'd love for you to share with our participants today a little bit about what that means.
Well, for everyone, I think stress happens anytime, anything, or anyone isn't the way we want it to be. And that happens a lot every day. In fact, if everyone could kind of think about what forces you to stop and wait from a few seconds to a few minutes, what kinds of things, and put it into chat. What kind of things force you to stop and wait for a few seconds to a few minutes? I think there are things all throughout the day that do that. So we're experiencing stress in what I would call the elementary school lessons of life, 15, 20 times a day.
All right.
And that how we respond to those makes a difference in how we deal with the graduate school lessons. So you were kind of asking, I think, more about my graduate school lessons. I've been fired, I've been divorced, I've been depressed. I was remarried with two teenage stepdaughters, which is kind of stressful. Let's see, I've been self-employed for 40 years, which basically means I'm permanently unemployed. I live not knowing where my income's coming from, where most people are terrified of ever being. And I've been dealing with that for, decades successfully. I got shot in the center of my chest by an unknown assailant a few blocks from my house years ago. That's kind of a significant event. I've been audited 3 times by the IRS. Some people would be taught than be audited. My second wife was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 3 months after we fell in love, and about a year before we got married. And we had a wonderful marriage for about 30 years, and she passed away about 11 years ago now. And so I've spent a lot of time both caregiving for her, and then my parents moved into my house, and my dad passed away about 2 years ago. My mother still lives with me and is doing great. But through that, those are what I would call graduate school lessons in life. I think because I learned how to handle some of the elementary school lessons quicker, faster, sooner, that made a big difference in how I handled the bigger ones, because you're never going to have nothing bad happen.
Come on, Rob. Don't you know that there's this mythical time where we all will achieve this sense of grace and perfect existence?
I want to inoculate people and prepare people as stress happens. You're going to have stressful reactions. The goal is not no stress, because I don't think that's possible. The goal is to learn how to recognize it quicker and move through it faster.
All right.
I think that's very realistic. And I think you can learn how to do that so quickly that other people don't even know you were stressed. So I have a lot of stress in my life, but you were complimenting me for being relaxed. Well, that's something I practice. The first chapter in my book, Find the Upside Down Time, is about how to speed through stress in 5 steps in 15 seconds. And so you have to know what causes your stress in the first place. And so I have this thing called the automatic stress reaction. So anytime anything isn't the way we want it to be, I think we have this process we go through automatically. We tend to hold our breath, tense our muscles, have self-doubt, think negative, and get serious. So I think we all do that. And we're really good at it. And we're so good at it, we'll probably never stop doing that. But what we can learn how to do is recognize it quicker and move through it faster, which would be through the opposite. Breathe deeper, relax completely, reassure yourself, think positive, and look for some humor. So in the first chapter of my book, where I talk about the shooting story, I talk about those 5 steps, but I just basically introduced them. So since then, I've created a website, speedthroughstress.com, speedthroughstress.com. And there's got a 20-minute video where I talk about getting shot, but also a 50-page workbook to learn how to practice each of these 5 steps. So some tools and techniques for breathing deeper, for what it means to be really relaxed.
Without falling asleep.
Learn how to reassure yourself about your value and your worth, because no baby is born with self-doubt. So whatever self-doubt we have, we learn. And stress is always about me having a doubt about my ability to be successful. If I knew I could be successful, where would there be any stress? So breathe, relax, reassure yourself, think positive, learn how to take that worry, which by definition is imagining what we do not want to have happen. And we're very good at that. We project a negative into the unknown automatically.
That's true.
But what would be the opposite of what we don't want to have happen? That's what we do want to have happen. That's actually called a goal. What we do want to have happen. And the opposite of every worry is a goal. Now, how long does it take us to move from a worry to a goal? That's how long we're going to experience stress. Because once you get clear about the goal, then the task is, okay, what action could I take towards the goal?
Right.
I have a whole process called the psycho-creativity that we could talk about for a minute, if you want to throw that up.
Sure. Let's put that on the screen. There we
go.
We
all kind of start with a need that's kind of in the middle. And we don't know exactly what to do, but we might have, let's say, a vision of possibility. We might see that goal. We might be able to flip that worry to a positive vision. And then what happens is we automatically go into doubt. I don't know how. How could I do it if I don't know how? And then we go off into I can't. I mean, I bet you almost everybody's had an idea at the time they had it. This would be $1 million idea. But then, I don't know how to do it. So then I go into I can't. And that's where we stay. But if you realize it's a normal part of the process to move from the I guess you could say the firstborn son of the mind is truth and the second-born son is doubt. And know that that's part of the process. Then what you can do is move into what's called stillness, breathing, relaxing, because in that stillness is where creativity can begin, and also where you start to shift out of I can't, because you're beginning to take action already. And then you move into persistence, which is, learning how to reassure yourself and to think positive. And if you notice all these little arrows, all you're going to see is when you persist in holding your mind on the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to get there, but what's one thing I could do that would move me in the general direction? And so that would be one of the first arrows. Oh gosh, my intuition says maybe I should call my Uncle Warren and ask him, or maybe I should do a Google search about something, or who might know more about this than me. So we come up with some possibilities that we take action on. And what happens is when you take that action, like if you look at the end of the first arrow, from there you see two other possibilities that you didn't see from the beginning. They weren't available to you until you took action. And so this is a process of unfolding, discovering the how.
Right.
Over time, with persistence, the key to success, you develop clarity. Oh, now I see the how. I haven't manifested it yet, but I'm on the way.
All right. Rob, you've gone over a lot of really great information. And for those of you just tuning in, please feel free to say your name, say where you're from. And if you have any questions, one of the questions Rob asked is, when you are experiencing stress, sometimes that's in those micro moments. And he was talking about those, the lower level education of stress versus the upper level education of stress. And those micro moments, what are those things? And for those of you tuning in, feel free to pop in the chat. What are those things that you wait for? Do you find yourself waiting for
stop and wait for a few seconds? Yeah, because how you learn to practice in those few moments is really important. Because once you get clarity, then you are recreating what you've imagined inside yourself as a goal out externally in the world. So you're now manifesting, recreating the inner imagination outside. And all of us have the capability of doing that, because all we do from morning till night is create. In fact, the stress we experience, whose stress is it? Might you have something to do with it?
Maybe.
But most of us don't take that step to consider that our stress is something we have something to do with. One of the things you were telling me before we started, Aaron, is you really liked my idea about the personality is divided by lessons we've learned and lessons we haven't learned.
Mm-hmm.
And that all our unlearned lessons is evidence of stress. So anytime you're experiencing stress, it's because you haven't learned how to deal with something. Doesn't mean you can't. Just means you haven't yet. Now, what do I need to do to move towards the process of doing that? And this psycho-creativity is one way of beginning to do that. So we can move out of that now and come back to.
Sure. But I would like to ask you something you mentioned before we hopped on the live show. Okay. Is you mentioned in the psycho-creativity that you don't have to know the how to achieve the goal necessarily right away. So I'd love to know more about that. Yeah. And what do you mean by that? Because, and I want to say really quickly, a hi to Jennifer, who's just tuning in from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And hi, Dee, great to see you from Houston. Mark, great to see you also from Houston, Texas. And again, if you guys have any questions as we move along through this, how to turn stress into success, please feel free to pop it in the chats. We're here to answer your questions. Absolutely. And Rob mentioned earlier in the show, what are those micro moments that cause us stress? Because if I'm interpreting what you're telling us, Rob, which is a lot of really great information, it's how we perform in the micro moments that set us up for the big leagues.
Yeah, what I call elementary school lessons in life. How to handle the small things when you're forced to stop and wait from a few seconds to a few minutes. Traffic, lines at the grocery store, if we ever get back at the grocery store. Waiting for the elevator, waiting for the microwave to finish its 2 minutes popping of the popcorn. It's just so long. All these little times where we are forced to stop. Most people resist that. Most people project frustration into that. So Henry Ford said, in answer to your question about the how, Henry Ford said there are people who think they can, and there are people who think they can't, and they're all right.
That's right.
And so I've just kind of oriented that a little bit to myself and said, whether I think I can or I think I can't, I'm right. Mm-hmm. And anytime I think I can't, that's going to cause my stress. The problem is we use the intensity of our emotion as evidence of the truth of our thinking. Let me say that again.
Yeah, say that again.
We use the intensity of our emotion as evidence of the truth of our thinking. So if I'm upset about something, my opinion about the something is going to be negative. My upset proves to me that my opinion is right.
I love that.
Okay. But the problem is that's not how things work. My emotion is a result of my judgment. So how I think causes how I feel. How I feel causes how I behave. How I behave produces results in my life. Now, that's a law of cognitive psychology, unless you have some neurological or chemical damage.
Right.
So if you've got any of that, get some medication. But other than that, how you think affects everything else. And the problem is we always think how we think is right, even if it causes us pain.
Or we think it's as a result of the environment. We don't consider, we always think the emotion comes first, not the thought. Now, there is an immediate reaction that is automatic.
Now, I may not like the way the situation is,
right?
But doesn't mean that I don't have choice about how to feel in the situation. I can have both my opinion that this is not a good situation, this is a challenging situation, frustrating situation, not the way I'd like it to be. But I don't have to also feel bad at the same time. One of my teachers, Paul Solomon, said, Rob, you don't have to be in a miserable situation and also feel miserable. Being in a miserable situation is bad enough.
It's optional to be miserable.
And he had this one grateful idea, really changed my life. It says, I need no excuse to experience and express pure joy. Which means anytime I'm not experiencing joy, it's because I got some excuse. I can't be joyful. It's raining outside. I can't be joyful. I don't like who's president. I can't be joyful. I've got work to do. I can't be joyful. I got to deal with this person.
You put conditions on our happiness.
Yes, exactly. And so I love this insight. I need no excuse. So I can choose to feel how I want to feel, which, by the way, we already are. We just have a belief that how we feel is caused by what's going on around us, as opposed to having something to do with our judgments about it and maybe what I would call our victim consciousness about things. So I practiced, for no reason, smiling. And I would encourage everybody right now, for no reason, you just put a big smile on your face and see how that feels, and force yourself for 60 seconds. For 60 seconds, smile real big, and while you're smiling, you'll notice a few things. While you're smiling, your cheeks are getting tired. And what that means is you aren't doing it enough. The other thing, while you're smiling, try to feel bad. Kind of like not really possible, because smiling actually has a chemical change in the brain. Smiling triggers norepinephrine and serotonin in the brain. Just the act of putting a smile on your face begins that process.
Even if you do this. Seriously, they did a study, and they decided to see whether voluntary smiling versus forced, putting a pencil or pen between your teeth, would make the same thing happen, and it does.
True.
The actual physical response in the brain. So you just put a big smiley face on. She's over here. She's smiling.
So you practice in the elementary school lessons in life all throughout the day, moving through the stress quicker by breathing, relaxing, reassuring yourself, think positively for some humor. So speedthroughstress.com is where to watch the video and get the workbook, because I think that's the foundation for everything. I don't teach stress management so much for health as for learning how to deal with the emotional wave that hits us in the middle of a conflict.
Right.
It causes us to forget any communication skill.
It does. It does. I want to say really quickly hi to Ahmed, who just tuned in. And Jennifer she said, I agree with all of this. I force myself to smile a lot, which makes me happier. Yay. And oops, sorry, Gail, I'll come back to you. I force me to smile a lot, which makes me happier. I don't like my job right now, but I make a conscious decision every day to be happy and not miserable.
Absolutely, because if you're doing something you don't really want to be doing, that's going to be stressful. So in the long run, you might want to change the job. But if you're going to job today, if you're choosing to be there, this is the way out of all stress. Choose to do what you're doing while you're doing it. Choose to do what you're doing while you're doing it. Whatever it is, if you choose to do it, it'll be less stressful. Now, you may want to make change in your life. I think that's why we're here, is to change the world. But if you can't change the world right now today, change yourself that you can't be happy in the way the world is today. I can still have my opinions about the world. I can still have my opinions about how things ought to be. And if you ask me, I'll tell you. But I don't have to wait until I get those things to enjoy myself in the moment. And I think that's a profound insight that's made a difference in my life, that I actually have something to do with how I'm feeling. And if you practice meditation, one of the most powerful benefits of that is it gives you the experience of causing yourself to feel how you want to feel by choice.
That's right.
So in my meditation process, I go through a certain set of steps of getting excited about change, letting go of the past, being open to being new, feeling love, experiencing serenity, taking responsibility, absolute harmony. So I've actually practiced experiencing this. I cause myself to feel those things. And there's a process I use that helps me do that.
And I would love to share with people really quick why it's important to actually imagine yourself experiencing the thing, and also why it is that the narrative we tell ourselves is so powerful. Because when we are creating that image in our minds, our brain does not know that it's not actually happening.
Exactly.
And whatever we tell ourselves also is creating a certain set of neural patterns, so neural networks. So neurons that fire together, wire together. And if we are telling ourselves, blah, blah, it's hard, then that is the program that's being encrypted in your brain. So then your brain will automatically see that as hard because that's the filter it's using.
Yeah,
so
your body doesn't know the difference between what we vividly imagine and what's actual reality. It will respond similarly to it. So we have a tendency, as we were talking earlier, to project a negative into the unknown. It's a habit. It's, I think, a survival protective technique.
Right.
But we don't have to stay with it. We can learn how to see that worry, as we were talking earlier, flip it to its positive opposite, a goal. And then what is one action I could take towards the goal? And all of a sudden, I'm out of the stress and engaged in being more productive. And it's as simple as, when you're in traffic, slow down. If someone wants to cut in front of you, let them,
And Jesse mentioned here, he said, smile for yourself, but also smile. It makes people wonder what you're up to next. Yeah, I love that, Jesse. Thank you. And Gail mentioned, that's so funny. Her husband uses the same philosophy. And it was also interesting here is, we're talking about a lot of really great information, I'd love to hear from each of you that are tuning in today. What is that physical response? Because sometimes when I'm coaching people through, managing emotions and managing mindset, we have a physical trigger. When whatever that trigger is, we feel a certain way. So getting familiar with how our body feels in stress is really important to helping then go through the steps Dr. Rob just shared with us. Being able to relax. What are the 5 steps again, Rob? It was
breathe, relax, reassure yourself, think positive, look for some humor. And I'm going to put up the link, feed through press as my name. So that's where you would go to get a free video and workbook on learning those skills, because I think they're just critical, not just in moving through the elementary school lessons so you're prepared for the graduate school lessons, but also in dealing with the inevitable conflicts. Because one of the things that I've learned that's really helpful a lot is the one thing that causes most conflict.
Yes.
So, most people don't know what that is, but let me ask everybody a question. There's no correct answer. You can put what you think in the chat. What % of conflict, arguments, disagreements do you think might be because of a misunderstanding? Just what kind of % of conflict, disagreements, arguments do you think might be because of a misunderstanding?
Yeah, so we can pop that right in the chats, and we'd love to see the percentages and how they match up.
Most people I've asked think 50% or more. About 75% think 75% or more. About 20% think 90% or more. Justice Brandeis of the Supreme Court some years ago thought it was 90% from his experience. So whatever you consider that to be, let's just look at the amount of conflict that is in fact because of a misunderstanding. What % of that is because you misunderstand? How many of you are thinking of a similar number?
Yes, we've got 97, most 90, 85. Dee said she holds her breath.
Yeah. But what percent we think we misunderstand is usually lower, but we're willing to take some responsibility. But I'd like to challenge people in the middle of an argument. What do you believe about your point of view? By definition, if in an argument, you believe you're right 1% of the time, 100% of the time. So when you know you're right and you know they're wrong, what is your job? I think to try to convince them that you're right and they're wrong.
Okay. Quick pause. How many of you are in a relationship? It doesn't matter if it's with a spouse or your family. And when you get into some sort of conflict, disagreement, that you then try to convince whomever you're speaking to that you're right. Just be honest. Share with us how often does this happen, that you try to convince them that you are right. Because I'll be the first to admit, Dr. Rob, that
me too. It's an automatic reaction, But think about this. When you do that, when you know you're right and you know they're wrong, and you try to convince them that they're wrong, what percent of the time are they grateful? But what percent of the time do we do it? All the time. So here's something we always do. It doesn't work. It doesn't matter. We're right. And what I would like people to learn how to do is be more curious, one, about why that person doesn't see what's so obvious to you. Mm-hmm. That's called humility. Being open to the possibility you don't know everything. Mm-hmm. Also, I've learned if I want the other person to be open to another point of view, it helps if I am willing to do that first. Mm. So if I model my openness by simply just asking a few questions, what is it you want me to know? Is there anything else? Is that all? I have found I discover where I misunderstood quicker. Mm-hmm. And if you did misunderstand, don't you want to know that pretty fast? You don't want to.
Yeah, so I love that. Would you mind repeating that? So the first question is,
what does he want me to know? I can tell this is important. What does he want me to know? And what are they going to do? They're going to start telling you.
Right.
And then the second question is there anything else? Because what's the chances there's something else?
Probably.
100%. And if they say something else, then I'm going to ask that again. But ultimately, I would say, is that all? See, I don't want to tell them I understand. I don't think that makes any difference at all. I want them to tell me. I want them to tell themselves that I understand.
That's very powerful, by the way.
Until that happens, there's no openness in their mind for any other point of view. And I have to deal with my stress in the meantime. So I have to breathe, relax, reassure myself that maybe I misunderstood. Let me see if I can find out. And if not, at least I've been open to the fact that maybe I misunderstood, which I think creates the context for maybe them being open. And I don't believe anyone is going to be open to considering there might be misunderstanding you if they don't feel understood.
Right. So, and by the way, for those of you tuning in, this is a big part of intentional listening. And you'll also notice that at no time did he mention that you agreed.
No, exactly.
You don't have to do that.
I have a 6-stage process. 6 stages of negotiating agreement. And the first stage is I understand you, and you're the authority of whether or not I understand you. And then the second stage is where and what I understand. If I'm misunderstood, it's over there. But where do I agree with you? Would be the next thing. And so if people go to Successful Work Relationships, successfulworkrelationships.com, there's a 3-minute video on those 3 questions. And there's worksheets. All this is free on 5 levels of a clear communication, 6 stages in reaching agreement, 3 questions to end conflict. So these 2 things are kind of one side of a coin. 2 sides of the coin is dealing with your stress in the middle of a conflict. So you're able to engage your mind and ask questions to discover if you may have misunderstood. And if you didn't, get them to tell you that you understand, and then to ask questions about why they think something different than you. And you can have a whole conversation where you're focused not just on proving you're right, which is what we go for almost all the time, but really supporting the strength of the relationship with someone that you care about. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the 2 things we most need to learn in our lives at work and at home. Yeah. So I've been marriage counseling for 30 years. And only one couple I thought never really loved each other. But I think everybody else did, but they no longer felt it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we fall in love and I say I love you and the other person says that they love me, we think they mean the same thing.
Mm.
No. Everyone has their own definition about what a loving person would do. So when they don't do what I think a loving person would do, the only way I can think about it is, well, they don't love me, and I have the evidence.
And Jesse mentioned, he said, is that under stress, it's challenging to have that self-awareness. And Jesse, you're right. And that's one reason why we need to focus on those micro moments before we get to the big leagues.
Yeah.
Practicing, dealing with our body's response to a situation that didn't go the way we expected it to.
Right.
And that way we can be more proactive and present in the moment.
More emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. That's what that's all about, that self-awareness in order to manage myself. And then therefore having more awareness of others in order to manage them in the relationship. But yeah, you practice in the elementary school lessons. I mean, think about a guy or a woman who wants to win a race, competitive race. How many times did they run that race in the rain, in the wind, with nobody in the stadium at all? How many hundreds of times did they run that race to be able to be at their best in the moment that it counted?
That's right.
So, yeah, you're going to have to practice dealing with your own emotional reaction, your own stressful reaction.
That's right.
In the elementary school lessons in life, if you have any chance of being good in the graduate school lessons in life.
That's right. So when that moment really hits you, and that's the critical time, whatever it looks like, and you haven't done that practice, just like an athlete, practicing and training for that big moment. If we haven't practiced managing our own stress and dealing with our response to it, then our chances of success are not that high. Now, Gail also shares, she said, in my last position, communication was not there. I saw 80% of the time the problems that were due to people not listening. Ooh, that's a big shocker. Gail, I know where you're coming from here. That's why sometimes rather than arguing the point, I would go and sit at the picnic table in the parking lot, reevaluate who's misunderstanding what, and then go back and list what my understanding is, and then ask, is this what you meant?
Perfect. And notice, she took a step away to manage her own stress so that then she could come back and engage in a process of eliminating misunderstanding. And you always want to eliminate that you misunderstood first. But the problem is we just have a hair trigger assumption we are right and they're wrong. So it needs to carry on your shoulder the angel whispering, maybe you don't know everything. And you don't want to think about that all the time, or you just be paralyzed. Oh my God, I don't know what to think. I don't know. But a good time to consider that maybe what you think might not be true is when someone's telling you you're wrong. Maybe that's a good time to consider it.
Mm-hmm. And if from time to time, because I've had this question come up before, well, what if, their point of view is just morally, ethically, whatever, completely opposing to me? Okay, well, typically, correct me if I'm wrong, we then try to make them understand our point of view.
Of course.
Which is natural. And if you want to do that, good luck.
Yeah, good luck, because one, they're not asking.
And you might be open to the opportunity to consider.
And they're not paying either.
they're not paying for that opinion. That you can just ask, well, that's interesting. Why do you feel that way?
Right. The real question, I think, in relationships, particularly personal relationships, you have to answer yourself. And that is, what's the difference between a requirement and a preference?
Mm-hmm.
I think we confuse that a lot. So I might prefer that someone have the same worldview as me, but is it actually a requirement for me to have them in my life? If it is a requirement, by definition, that's not negotiable. That's what a requirement means. It's not debatable. You agree to this requirement of mine, or it's a deal breaker. And the problem is, I think we tend to treat a lot of things that I believe are actually just preferences as requirements. And once you're real clear about what the requirements are, I think you'll find there's very few. And if those are met, great. Everything else is just a preference, and you don't go to war over preferences. And I have a whole video and blog on this one particular point. If you go to, Dr. Rob I think you can get to it from the Speed Through Stress. That's still in my Dr. Rob Pennington website. There's a blog there that you can go to and then put in preferences, and you can get to the video about this, because I think that's key to the success of long-term in any relationship, is being clear about what your requirements are for how you want to be treated. And once you're clear about those, then everything else is just a preference.
That's right. It helps you set effective boundaries too.
Yeah, and I don't need them to be different than they are for me to feel okay and to be in the relationship. It just maybe we're not going to talk about that so much.
That's right. Well, Dr. Rob, it has been a huge pleasure listening to all this wisdom from you. I know it's just every time I was sharing with him before we went live on the show that every time he talks about a subject, I'm always over here, writing notes. So his wisdom on handling conflict, handling our stress, and I tend to over summarize things. So over summarizing is almost like we're practicing intentional and active listening for ourselves, so then we can do it with others.
Absolutely. I agree. Learning how to basically monitor your emotion during the day. Just be checking in on how you're feeling. Is it positive or negative? Just starting to be curious about that. Another powerful tool is keeping a journal. The value of the journal from a self-awareness point of view is immeasurable. It's the most powerful tool for that. And what you really want to do is not just capture your thoughts, but on some regular basis, once a week, once a month, you want to go back and reread what you've written, looking for repeating patterns.
That's right.
Repeating patterns of concern, frustration, or stress. Because in the moment, we're stressed about something. We don't realize, I was stressed about this 2 days ago. I was stressed about this last week. I was stressed about
right.
And we have these repeating issues. Maybe there's something we need to learn about that. Because remember, my opinion about stress is it's evidence of an unlearned lesson. If I knew how to handle something, it wouldn't be stressful.
That's right. And also, I have a book coming out, and that includes how to manage your emotions. There is an emotional management guide in that book, as well as a ton of other resources. And I also talk about the importance of reflection, power of reflection, and cognitive journaling. It's interesting. We think we learn by our experiences, and that's not necessarily true. We learn through reflection of those experiences. So evaluated experiences. If we don't evaluate them, we don't learn. And guess what? It just keeps happening.
Right. I had a client once who was married 8 times. Her complaint was they were all the same. And I was like, surprise, surprise. What's the common denominator here? She didn't think she had anything to do with it, because that's the way men are. But that belief is what was blocking her from considering that there's possible for someone to be different than what she was believing.
Right. And be careful what you tell yourself and what you put out there, because we tend to attract what we have decided, what is on our mindset, because our brains are highly effective filters. Even though we receive somewhere around, I don't know, so many billion bits of information per second, we only process 5 or 6. So we're very effective filters, and our brain will filter out everything else that does not agree with the mindset you've established.
Yeah. So the question to ask is what I think is true. The question to ask is, does this make me feel free? So across the main building at the University of Texas, I used to give guided tours there when I was a student, is written, "You shall know the truth, and truth shall make you free." Now, that's a quote from Jesus. But for me as a psychologist, I thought, maybe that has something to do with how do I determine what's true? If it doesn't make me feel free, maybe there's something not true about it. And so just that question has helped me look at my thoughts and divide them into the positive and negative ones, and to learn how to look at the negative ones as something I've learned. And is that really best for me? And what would be the positive opposite of it? And what would be the evidence for that? So you learn to realize that I think I was a computer programmer during college. That's how I put myself through college, is programming. And I had the realization that, computer doesn't do anything it hadn't been programmed to do. And our mind is very much like that. We have belief systems that are very much like the line of code. And so you can learn to go in and discover those beliefs, and you can learn how to remove them and put in a different one, and change the quality of the rest of your life. And
right.
Management and some of the things we've been sharing today, I find is at the very bedrock of being a more powerful, loving, successful, amazing human being. is learning how to take responsibility for how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do that, one choice you have is to feel love more often. So I discovered early on in my second marriage that sometimes my wife, the way I thought about it is my wife loved me, and sometimes she didn't know it.
That's great.
I really went into it. She actually didn't love me, even though she was telling me so. It's just, that was a way of getting my attention that she was hurt and angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Rob, it's been a great pleasure, and I hope all of you tuning in have enjoyed this as much as I have. Always wonderful to hear your wisdom and golden nuggets that you share with us. And Gail,
hard-learned nuggets.
Yes, hard learned. I do encourage you.
Out of the down times, yes.
I do encourage you to pick up his book that is available at CoachEUrban. I love that relaxation. Practice. Gail does have a question, though, before we exit the show. She says, right now I'm having a problem getting away from the thought that there's no next job for me. How do I do that?
Okay, well, the first thing I realize is how many next jobs have you had already, Gail? And haven't you always had one? So it doesn't serve you to think that you aren't going to have one. So you just don't know what it is. So here's something I would recommend for everybody when you're projecting negative into the unknown, is to find what it is you do know. So whatever next job you're going to have, Gail, you already know some qualities about it. You already know some pieces of the puzzle, or it wouldn't be the job you want. So start focusing on what are the pieces of the puzzle that I need before it's going to be the job I want. And make that list. And then start imagining what it would feel like to wake up in the morning going to such a job. And practice now when you don't have the knowledge about what it's going to be. That's called positive prayer. Worry is negative meditation. This is positive meditation. Mm-hmm. And then take action on what would help you move towards the thing. Because I have the same challenge in being self-employed and looking for work. It's a constant thing for me. And so this is something I do that really is helpful. And I would recommend anyone try to do that. There's also a book from the 60s called Money is My Friend by Phil Laut, L-A-U-T, costs about $6. And it's a really good way of looking at what my ideal career would be.
Mm-hmm. And it's also very powerful from the neuroscience standpoint. You're actually creating the right neural connections, the right neural networks that will allow your brain to respond and act in a way as if. And that will actually, there's this law of attraction. Well, actually, there's a scientific reason why that works. Because once we've created the right patterns, then we're acting as if, and we're actually creating the circumstance that we want versus the one we don't.
So I'd recommend, Gail, start feeling grateful for the job you're going to have that you don't know what it is yet.
That's right. We don't necessarily need to know how. It's just really important that we feel that feeling of that gratitude.
That doesn't feel very realistic, but I think that's based on the assumption that we know what realistic is, and maybe that's not true. And so in the meantime, while you're in the job you're in, and while you're waiting to get clarity about the job that you want, one of the things to start practicing is being grateful for the future that you haven't manifested yet. And is this recorded? Can they go back if they haven't and seen the cycle of creativity? Because that would be really a way.
Yes, this is available not only on LinkedIn, but also YouTube and Facebook. You can find this on my YouTube channel. Go to my channel, subscribe. You'll get access to this video and a host of other ones. And it is available a replay. And if you are watching the replay later, please feel free to pop your questions in the comments. I will be notified. We'll get back to you as soon as possible with answers to your questions. And Ahmed says he wants to know what Dr. Rob is drinking, so you can also relax.
Water.
Water, yeah. And believe it or not, he's naturally this way. After having gone through many years of educational lessons, you have a choice. As I say, you can either get better or bitter. And he chose to get better. And share it with you exactly how to do that. So it's been a pleasure, Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for all of you tuning in, I'll see you next time. Remember, this week is a big series week. We have another Career Coffee Chat show this week on Thursday. So please feel free to tune in at 11 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. And don't forget, Career Coffee Chat podcast is available on all the major channels. And My book, Elevate Your Career for More Impact and Income, is coming out on January 27th, and you don't want to miss that.
Wow.
Be sure to go to CoachEUrban.com, books, and get in on the launch party. I'll see you next time, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.